Saints have officially fired head coach Dennis Allen. We're going to take a look at what this means for their eye towards the future as the next era of New Orleans Saints football is on the way. We'll take a look at what's immediately next for the New Orleans Saints, who will take over at head coach, how the New Orleans Saints will treat the rest of the season. We'll dive into all that. But we're going to start today and kick things off with the firing of Dennis Allen, why it makes sense, why the New Orleans Saints had to make the move. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day, for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, good morning, New Orleans, and the future is here. You've woken up in an alternative timeline, and one that I'm sure that many of you are excited to see. And look, when I say excited to see, I want to always kind of preface these types of things with, obviously, there are real life human beings that are a part of this, with real life families who need real life jobs to get them real life fed and real life safe. There's no doubt about that. But the New Orleans Saints absolutely needed to make this move. The New Orleans Saints franchise was once upon a time, in a not too distant future, or not too distant past, rather, a team that was built on streaks, playoff streaks, win streaks at home. Remember, with a dome field advantage, all of that. Streaks like the defense not allowing 100-yard rushers, all of those pieces. The New Orleans Saints now are a team of firsts, and that has been the story of Dennis Allen's career and tenure, rather, as the New Orleans Saints head coach. Yesterday, the New Orleans Saints suffered their seventh straight loss for the first time since 1999. They became the first team in the last 20 years to lose a game in which they outgained an opponent by 150 plus yards and won the turnover battle, only to lose that game. They opened up the opportunity for quarterback Bryce Young to see his first victory formation of his career. That will be the end of the story for Dennis Allen, as Dennis Allen becomes the first head coach the New Orleans Saints have moved on from or had to part mid-season since Jim Mora in the 80s. And that was a resignment. This was a firing. And this was a move that the New Orleans Saints needed to make. Again, with all due respect to the humans that are impacted by this story, there is nothing about what the New Orleans Saints have done over the course of the last 3 years, and especially this historic, for New Orleans, 7-game losing streak that they're experiencing right now, that they have extended against the NFL's worst team in the league, a team that they absolutely throttled to open up the season. There is no way that you can move past this and not make a change. One thing that we know in all walks of life, every single walk of life, no matter what background you come from, what job you work, what things you believe in, what things you don't believe in, is that resentment travels. Resentment moves along. And when you, as an organization, are faced in a situation like this, you have to keep resentment from traveling. That's why you have to make this move if you're the New Orleans Saints. You move on from Dennis Allen immediately, because if you don't, or if you didn't, right, the Saints did, but if you didn't, then players begin to resent that coach. And let me tell you, I spoke with a couple of players this morning from both sides of the football that have multiple years experience working with Dennis Allen after Nick Underhill's report over at New Orleans Football about Dennis Allen losing the locker room. Asked them, what would you say? What do you have to say about the idea of Dennis Allen losing your locker room? One player simply said yes. Another player simply said, been lost, as if the locker room had been lost. So you have to do this. And so you see the resentment that was already starting to pile up for Dennis Allen. If you, as an organization, Gail Benson, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Lauscha, the New Orleans Saints organization as a whole, didn't make this move today, that resentment moves from Dennis Allen and straight to you, the decision maker, for having that guy still in that building, having that guy still at that podium, and having that guy still in those team meetings and on that sideline. That resentment travels. And when that happens and that permeates, your organization then gets into new general manager conversations, new ownership conversations, and all those things. Gail Benson and the New Orleans Saints did the right thing by moving on from Dennis Allen when it came to this move. And now, look, this isn't going to make the season better moving forward, right? The Saints are 2-7 through their first 9 games. They're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but they're realistically eliminated from the playoffs. They have 8 games ahead. You're not going to turn the season around just because Dennis Allen has been fired, but you now begin to have an eye towards building and laying the foundation for what your future becomes for your team. That is the big thing. I'm in an airport lounge right now in like a little booth because the New Orleans Saints made this move. This is how much I did not expect the Saints to actually do this, by the way. I did not expect that they were actually going to make the move in season, but I think it was the right thing to do. We've talked about that several times here on the show. Everydayers will remember that we know what New Orleans Saints should do. The question is, would they do it? And they absolutely got it done. So it's what needed to happen here. And now the Saints can focus on moving forward throughout the rest of this season, evaluating its talent and getting a look at how it's going to build its future. And that could mean departures, so you can build through addition, but you can also build through subtraction throughout this season to help your future salary cap situation, all those other things. Make no mistake about it, Dennis Allen will be right back in the NFL. He will be right back in the NFL. He's going to be a defensive coordinator again. He absolutely deserves that. He's one of the better defensive minds in the NFL. That's where he's going to go. But for the New Orleans Saints, what they do after this season is wrapped up needs to be all about how they move into their new leadership and their new era. They won't be able to get to that, though, until the season is done. So coming up next, what I want to take a look at is what the immediate impact of this head coach firing is for the New Orleans Saints, who will take over, where they turn, and how they approach the rest of this season. Let's dive into all of that next as we continue to break down the firing of head coach Dennis Allen here on the Locked On Saints podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon in order to be able to eat up all